It's game preview time, Adam. As the Buffs and Utes, we're ready to go. And there's a lot of times we come into this game against Utah. It's the last game of the season, and it's like, let's just get this season over with. And now there's a high level of excitement. Like, no, let's keep this going. They need this win. There's a lot on the table here. Much different feel going into this Utah game than in years past.
In a much different feel in terms of where these two programs are, like kind of
Yeah.
building off your point there of like a lot of years it was just kind of Colorado limping to the finish line,
Mhm.
whereas this year it's Utah limping to the finish line. And shoot, they still got more games after this week. So it's been a rough year for the Utes. They started out 4-0, and we've seen them lose five in a row, but it's still a team that has a lot of talented pieces, especially
Mhm.
defensively. So it's kind of like it feels like this year, Brian, Colorado's almost going up against a wounded animal. And wounded
Yeah.
animals can be dangerous, but we were talking prior to some of the media scrums this week of some of the comments coming out of Utah, especially Kyle Whittingham, talk about things like you've got to laugh to keep from crying. Like there are some things happening in Salt Lake City, especially after that BYU loss, that we're just not used to seeing out of that program because they have been so consistent. And I'm glad they caught the young man that threw the water bottle that tagged the BYU cheer coach in the head, because it was an ugly scene after that game, and you had the Utah athletic director stepping in the post game press conference and getting reprimanded. It's been a rough stretch, and it kind of remind me a little bit too here, Brian, of like how big that Utah BYU rivalry is.
Mhm.
And so what is the mental makeup of this Utah team coming out to Boulder this week? I don't know. It looks different than what we've seen from that program.
Well, yeah, and we were talking about it in person the other day, but I think that's one of the biggest keys of this game is what Utah team you're going to see, and I really feel that for those who don't know, I mean that Utah BYU game, that is a bitter rivalry. I mean it's one of the more underrated rivalries in the country, I think, as far as like how bitter that is. And Kyle Whittingham said the other day on Monday, he goes, we put everything we had into winning that game, and it's going to be tough to overcome that loss. And that's where I wonder what mindset you have with Utah as you're asking that. You know, I think it's a good thing for CU that they lost that game because I almost feel like they were, Utah was 4-4 going into that one, and that was their Super Bowl. Shador's right in that they're everybody's Super Bowl except for Utah, I think, because that was the Utah Super Bowl. If Utah wins that game, they really could have flipped their season around and gone on a little bit of a run here, a spoiler run where you beat BYU, then you get Utah or CU, and then I think they have Iowa State next week. So they had a chance to go on kind of a spoiler run and turn their season around. You lose that one, and yes, there's still bowl eligibility out there for Utah, but man, they not only lost that game, Adam. They went for a spark with Brandon Rose at quarterback. He gave it to him, but then he gets hurt for the year, out for the year. Their
Yeah.
best player is probably, at least on offense, is Brant Keithy. He goes down late in the year. Late in the game. He's out for the year. So you not only lost that game, you lost two more players for the year. And then the other day, one of their backup running backs, Jalen Glover, who wasn't having a great year, but he's played well in the past, announces that he's foregoing the rest of the season, going into the portal. You see some cracks in Utah now, and it's almost, yeah, yes, a wounded animal can be dangerous, but a wounded animal, I think, could also be one that if you get on them early, they're done.
Yeah, 100%. It's going to come down to being able to score points against their defense,
Yep.
because Utah still has, and they're pretty healthy on that side of the ball. A lot of the
Yeah.
injuries for Utah has come on the offensive side of the ball. And so if you can put up 30 points against that defense, you're going to win this football game on
Yeah.
Saturday. And so we've seen some of the slow starts, Colorado's offense getting in a rhythm. It's been more consistent recently. It seemed like those slow starts lingered longer very early in the season. And even if they have a bad drive or play to start, a game now, they're able to get over that a
Mhm.
little bit quicker. And you're not coming off a bye week right now. So if Colorado come out, its opening drive and score a touchdown, yeah, you might really early in this game start that process of putting Utah out to pasture this season, because I think that while it was such a big deal for them, and I agree with you that last week was their Super Bowl, you still have kind of that carrot of going out to play Colorado with all the eyeballs that have been on them this season to dangle in front of this team. And Kyle Whittingham is such a great coach, and we heard Coach Prime and his admiration from earlier this week. I have a hard time seeing this as a team that just lays over and plays dead for the last 3 weeks, but
Yep.
you get in on them early with some of the stuff we talked about with their issues offensively, and this could be a going away win for the Buffs.
Yeah, and I agree with Coach Prime. I'm glad he said this, but he said, look, anytime you've got that guy, meaning Kyle Whittingham on the other side, you have to respect. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he goes, they're gonna come to play. And I agree with him. I don't think Utah's gonna lay down, but human nature sometimes takes over too. And they do still have bowl eligibility, and so you have to respect Utah. It's a dangerous game because Utah's really kicked their butt in the last several years. You have to respect Utah and what they are and what they're capable of, because if you don't play well, this is a team that can beat you. And Utah's going to play for pride. We know they have that, and they do have bowl eligibility. You wonder how much they want to go to a bowl
Yeah,
if they're really banged up, but that carrot is still out there, and so I don't necessarily think a fast start is essential in this one. I think you can overcome it because Utah's not going to score enough to bury you. But I think that it's important in the aspect of what you're talking about that you could bury the Utes with a fast start. I mean, if it's 14-0 at the end of the first quarter, forget it. I think CU cruises in that one, and so the hard part's going to be getting the 14-0 though, because Utah's hard to score against.
yeah. Well, it should be a fun atmosphere. Fox Big Noon Kickoff coming back to Boulder. You've had some good stats out there. I think, didn't you tweet that this is Colorado's tied with Ohio State for the most appearances from Fox Big Noon Kickoff since the beginning of last year?
Yeah, since the beginning of 2023, Fox, the times that Big Noon has been on location to a CU game it's basically equal to the amount of Ohio State, because they've already announced they're going to be at Ohio State, Michigan in a couple weeks. So
Okay.
seven times now that CU's been on there, and I think the only other I can't remember the other Big Ten team, but like most of the ones that are up there are Big Ten teams. So it's like Ohio State, Michigan, Nebraska's up there too, because they've been there for Ohio State and Michigan. Penn State's up there as well, but it's mainly Big Ten and CU, and the Buffs are pretty good. They've only lost once in these six Big Noon Kickoff appearances, and that was the USC game last year that they almost came back and tied that thing. But yeah, they're pretty good when Big Noon's in town, or in the same town the Buffs are in.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to a week ago when we were doing this. We were trying to figure out how in the world we were going to get down to Lubbock, Texas
Yeah,
because of the weather. So this week it's totally different. We're going to be in Boulder and a 10 a.m. start, which I know that the folks at Tailgate do not like that. But we were talking about this too as we were waiting for interviews this week, that from a media standpoint, this is perfect. You get down there, and we're still going to be working until like mid-afternoon, but you finally get home and you can watch some other college football games. And so I don't know, are we going breakfast burritos this week in the press box, Brian?
absolutely. You have to when you get there at 7 a.m. And yeah, you said mid-afternoon. I'll be working into the evening. I'm usually, I don't know about you, but I'm usually done about 8-9 hours after kickoff, which would be
Same,
six
yeah.
7 o'clock. And then what I like about these kickoffs is then I can kind of sit back a little bit in the evening and watch some football around the country. And I got to do my top 25 rankings before I go to bed on Saturday night. So I like these early games.
In Colorado, you talked about rankings 17 in the college football playoff rankings, 18th in the AP, which you vote in, and 20th in the coaches. Is there just a hint of jealousy in that coaches poll from guys that, had to kind of go up through the ranks and didn't have quite the same path that Coach Prime had to having a top 25 team?
There might be a little of that. I would guess there's probably some of this with AP voters too. When they're doing their ballot, they're like, I guess Colorado's 18th, like I bet there's still some of that. Like thinking, I don't want to put them that high, but you almost have to, So I do wonder if there's maybe a coach or two that's like, nah, I'm going to put them 21. instead
The
of
good thing
19.
is, yeah, it truly does not matter until the end.
Right.
So,
Well, and
and I'm not
look,
trying to downplay what you do every week because it's fun to, check in on the rankings. But
right, right.
some people get so bent out of shape about it that I just don't understand that.
Yeah, and look, I admit as an AP voter, the AP poll has less weight than it ever used to have. The coaches poll has even less. I mean, I barely even cite the coaches poll much. It's really AP, and I will say this: the AP poll, where I think it has some weight, is there is still the AP national champion. Now it's generally who's going to win the college football playoff, but there is some prestige still with where you land in those final rankings, and they don't do a final college football playoff ranking at the end of the season. At least they haven't. So, kind of where you end up in that final AP ranking is kind of a big deal too. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, there's some prestige to it, and yeah, it is funny how people they get worked up about it, man. And then like a couple weeks ago when the Buffs were 21, was it 21, or were they
Mhm.
20 last week? Whatever it was, I had them on
They
my
were
ballot.
20 last week.
Oh,
Yeah.
they were 20. So I think I had them 21. And you still have people that are like, I'm down, I don't believe in the Buffs because I had them 21 when they're actually 20. Like, come on. And so it's people do get worked up. And over the years, I was a voter for basketball for a couple of years. And I remember one year, I'm kind of going off a tangent here, but um I did not have St. Louis in my top 25. This is men's basketball. And they were a pretty good team, but they were kind of like my 26, 27. And I did not have them in the poll, but they were ranked. And man, the St. Louis fans, they were all over me on Twitter. And there was another year, it was like Auburn football was the same type of deal. I didn't have them they either weren't in the poll or they weren't as high as the Auburn fans wanted. And I heard from Auburn fans a lot. And so yeah, you get some nastiness from those fans. I don't get it as much now because like you said, the poll doesn't mean as much, especially once you get into November. But um, it's still a fun exercise to do that every week and just kind of look at the teams, and helps me to kind of evaluate and keep up to tabs
Mhm.
what's going on with all those teams.
Do you get to vote in the AP All-American team as well, or how is that figured out?
I have before. It kind of depends on if I have time. They basically they ask all the voters, all the poll voters, to contribute to that, and not everybody does. It usually winds up of the 60. I think there's 63 voters, which I don't know how they came up with that number, but I think there's usually like 16 or 16 to 20 that actually vote in the All American. I probably will this year because there's some buffs that it'd be good to get a couple votes in there for.
Yeah, I'm surprised that the voter participation's that low or something like
Well,
that.
it's time consuming, and
Yeah.
it's one of those things you don't. Not that you need to get compensated for everything, but you don't get compensated for it. And if you do it right, which I can't just throw together a blind list and say, yeah, here's my ballot, because I think AP All American means a lot, and so you want to spend some time on it, and so to really dive into it takes some time. I mean, that can be several hour process, kind of go through, and I want to make sure, are these the two best receivers in the country? Who's the best quarterback? Yeah, and offensive line, that's the hard one.
Ooh, yeah.
Like how do you really determine, you know, but for me, when I've done it in the past, you go through, and usually by then all the all conference teams are out. And so that's where I generally start, is if somebody didn't make first team all conference, they're not going to be an all American. So you start with the all conference lists on the offensive linemen, and but it takes a while to go through that stuff. So I think that's why some of that participation is lower. And um, you know, for me, I've had time in the past because CU season is over at the end of November. But this year I may not have as much time, but I think I want to do it this year.
Yeah, we're all kind of looking at each other going, okay, 3 games left. Potentially we're in Dallas for the Big 12
Yeah,
championship game, potentially in New York for the Heisman Trophy candidate. You've got signing day in there, and you've got whatever bowl game or if it's college football playoff game
yeah.
coming up after that. It's going to be a crazy month and a half, really, going forward.
Well, think about this: they could have 3 games in December, because you could have the Big 12 title game, and then you could have the first round of the college football playoff, and then the quarterfinals would be on potentially on the 31st. So you could have 3 CU football games in December, in addition to signing day and a Heisman Trophy ceremony. So yeah, it could be pretty wild.
Yeah, it looks like the LeBron James gif where he's talking about this is my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty incredible to come, to this place. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, it's good, Brian, and we've talked about this a lot, that it seems like the guys on the team have fully bought into the 1 week at a time approach.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
it's a cliche, but it matters. Like you have to have that mindset. And I don't know if that's part of what happened last year. I think more of it was personnel stuff on the lines that caused
Yeah.
it more so than any off the field stuff, or guys on last year's team kind of thinking about games down the road. And I know Coach Prime hates talking about last year, so I'll stop there. But it does seem like a different mindset that is taking place, and they've gone through that experience of getting the pats on the back and seeing things unravel. And so I think it's easier when you've had that experience, even though there's so many new players on this year's team, to still have those veterans that were around saying, look, this is the mindset we need to have. And it certainly seems like they do.
Well, I think it's a key to success in a lot of ways. And that 2016 team that we covered, which was the only good football team we've covered in the last decade before this year, they had that. They were very good at looking week by week. And I think that was the key to their success. I think that's the key to this team's success. And they really flipped the page and move on to the next one. And that's where, we go back to the original, what we were originally talking about. That's what's going to be interesting about this week is, has Utah flipped the page, and Kyle Whittingham was talking about how tough it's going to be to flip the page from that BYU game. I have no doubt CU has moved on from Texas Tech, and they're like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's great, nice.
I think everybody was just happy to get the F
Oh
out of
yeah.
there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they flipped the page from Lubbock, no question. But moving on from that game, I have no doubt they've done that because um I don't think these guys look ahead, but there's a fine line between looking ahead and knowing what's ahead, knowing what's at stake if you continue focusing on what's right in front of you. And I think this team, they've been really focused, and that's been the most impressive thing to me is how they've just come out week after week, and it's this game right here, and we're going to go win this game.
Yeah. And and you think back to 2016, which you mentioned, Colorado kind of reached their goal when they clinched the Pac-12 South title.
Yeah.
They go out to the Pac-12 championship game in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it was tough because it felt like they had kind of, on some level, as a team, felt like they reached the pinnacle because of
Right.
where the program had been.
Yep.
And this is putting the cart in front of the horse discussion here, but with this year's team, it does feel like if they do clinch an appearance in the conference championship game, if they're able to win the next 3 weeks, that I don't think there'll be quite that same drop off in terms of just emotions that 2016 team kind of poured out in that locker room after they beat Utah to win the South.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the 12-team playoff helps. I think that had there been that 12-team playoff option in 2016, it might
Sure.
have been different because that CU team, they had already lost twice. Had they won the Pac-12, they probably weren't going to be in the CFP, right? With 2 losses. I don't remember where they were, but
No, not at that point.
I
Yeah.
think for them it was playing for the Rose Bowl, but not a CFP. Whereas this team, there's much more at stake if you keep going. So I think it's easier to kind of not have that drop off. But I also think this team I think they've got bigger goals than that 2016 team had at this stage.
Yeah.
It was almost like because it had been so long since CU had won, and it was sort of the same program for a long time. It was like we arrived at once they won the South. This one's like no, we're going for everything, and so it's gonna be interesting to see how they handle this last stretch. And but it starts this week, and as we've talked about, you cannot overlook Utah. Even though we sort of are in the way we're talking, but the team cannot overlook Utah.
You can't overlook their defense,
Right.
I think is what I come down to. Like
Yeah.
if Utah comes out against what we've seen from Robert Livingston's defense this season and scores 30 points, I'll be shocked.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
you respect their defense and you try to get that timing down offensively a little bit quicker in this game than you have some of those other games.
Yeah.
You go back to week 2 at Nebraska, the Baylor game. You don't want to start out in that way offensively. And if you don't, then yeah, this shouldn't be a game you should be worried about. I don't think, but you've got to go out and do that.
Yeah, and their defense, by the way, number one in the Big 12, but their pass defense is one of the best in the country. That's what's going to be interesting here is that, I mean, they're number 8 in the country as far as pass efficiency defense. They're one of only 2 teams in the country, Notre Dame being the other, that the opponents have less than 50% completion percentage. So they've done a really good job there, and they're doing it without even really getting to the quarterback, Adam. I mean, they've only got 16 sacks, and 10 of them were in the first 3 weeks in non-conference play. They had 3 against BYU. Up to that point, they had 3 in Big 12 play. So it's not like they're really getting to the quarterback a whole lot, but I think they're just really good in the back end. And so the Buffs are going to have to do some things differently that other teams have not. But the Buffs have Shedeur Sanders, and other teams have not had Shedeur Sanders. So, you know, I remember the last time they played a team that was ranking really high on pass defense. It was Baylor, and Shedeur Sanders had a really nice game. There's a bigger sample
Mhm.
size with Utah, but I feel like Shedeur is going to put up better numbers than Utah's been giving up.
Be nice to get Jimmy Horn back in the mix too,
Yeah,
because when you've got those 4 guys out there, I respect Utah's pass defense, but when they've got all 4 of those receivers healthy, this is just a Colorado offense, and you're giving Shador time that
mhm.
you're still going to be able to get enough yards and points, even against this Utah defense.
I just thought of this last year. One of their touchdowns wasn't it? Was it Jimmy that threw one to Dylan Edwards?
That sounds right. Yeah.
That's all right. So, can we finally see Travis throw a touchdown pass?
Well, that would not hurt his Heisman campaign.
And that was Pat Shermer calling that play. Is that a play you bring back for Utah? It worked last year.
Travis Hunter could be a quarterback if he wanted to be. Like, that's
Right.
how
Mm-hmm.
unbelievably talented he is. And he does have a really good arm. I
Right.
know that's something we've been kind of waiting for, right? Since he got on campus, because we've seen
Right.
him zip around balls, the few opportunities we've gotten to get in there to watch them practice or even pregame. So hopefully they weren't planning that and we just ruined their surprise.
Yeah, we just ruined it. By the way, Travis could also kick if he wanted to. If he
What
wasn't the
can what
high,
can Travis do?
if there wasn't so much at stake, and if he didn't have already a couple of an injury and a little banged up this year, I might consider throwing him out there in kickoffs. But seeing if he could be that. Is it 6 guys they've used, or is
Five.
it 5?
Just
But
5 guys
yeah,
have kicked off for the Buffs
just
this year
5
so
guys.
far.
I want to look back. That touchdown last year. I was trying to find out if that was Jimmy Horn. Yeah, Dylan Edwards, 30-yard pass from Jimmy Horn Jr. So yeah, sorry, Pat Shermer, if we just ruined ruined a plan there, but I would guess that Utah has not forgotten that. That's one of those things that they're
Yeah.
studying. They are one of the few teams that last year did face a Pat Shermer called offense with the Buffs, so they do have a little bit of experience seeing that. So, but yeah, personally, I'd love to see it. Travis Hunter throw into somebody. Is it Augustive? Is it Jimmy Horn? LeJounte Wester to
There,
Shador.
there, there are a lot of options there. Yeah.
Yeah, so it'd be a lot of fun. What do you think on this one? Let's do predictions.
Yeah, I mentioned that Utah lost their previous 3 games by a combined 10 points.
Yeah,
I expect them to lose this one game by just a little bit more than that. I think that coming out, it will be kind of a back and forth with Utah's defense showing some things and playing well early on. But I see this as a game that, a lot of times Utah kind of has the boa constrictor thing where they just kind of slowly take the life out of you. I could see that, somewhat being the case in reverse this time in this rumble in the Rockies is I think what they coined it when they both joined the Pac-12. It didn't quite become much of a rumble for many of those years, but it'll be a rumble early, and then Colorado will cruise to a 31-20 victory to improve to 8-2.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever written Rumble in the Rockies, by the way. That's how little that one caught on.
Yeah,
But I feel the same way. I feel like, I mean, this Utah team, you have to respect their defense. Offensively, they're averaging 14 points a game over the last 5 weeks. They just lost another quarterback. They lost their tight end. Money Parks, who's one of their top receivers, is out for the year. They do still have Dorian Singer, who's a pretty good receiver.
yeah.
Hasn't reached the end zone yet this year. And if he's going to do it this year, he's going to have to do it, or this week, he's going to have to do it against one of the best secondaries in the country. So I just think, I don't think CU is going to have an easy time scoring, but I think they're going to have an easy time outscoring Utah, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I Utah hasn't given up more than 27 in a game this year. I think this happens for the first time this week, and I'm along the same lines as you, but a little bit more of a spread. I've got 31-13, Colorado winning this one going away, and I think they improved 8-2 and keep cruising along.
And that will begin hopefully a fun, hectic stretch.
Yes.
Continuing with, and I think with the Heisman at this point, so much of it just comes down to Travis Hunter being healthy. Because I
Yeah.
feel like if that continues to be the case, there's no question he's going to be in New York next month. So
Yeah. Stay healthy, and he's got to put up. It would have been nice to get one more yard last week because 100 yard looks better than 99, but he would have got it had he not dropped two passes, which he never does. But he's got to get some numbers too. But yeah, as long as he's healthy, it's hard to see him not winning it, right?
well, and the interesting thing is that they didn't target him last week, aside from that offsides play,
Yeah.
which didn't count. Like to me, honestly, Brian, that should like stand out even more than if he had gone out there and had like four pass breakups.
Right.
I don't know. It just that shows such a level of respect that you wonder how much the Heisman voters are kind of taking some of that stuff into account as well.
Well, honestly, that's up to CU and their PR department, their sports information department, not putting some pressure on them, but uh, they're the ones that have got to put together the stat package. Their department. I was actually when I was driving from Lubbock to Midland for my flight the other day, I decided to call Dave Platty. Hadn't talked to him in a long time. I'm like, I've got 2 hours, and called and caught up with him a little bit, and we were talking about some of this stuff. And he said, when Dion Figures won the Thorpe Award, he said that was one of the things he would do is he looked up a lot of kind of interesting numbers because nobody was throwing at Dion Figures, and he was looking up some numbers like that to point out to the voters. And he goes, I think that's what got him the Thorpe Award, was pointing out some of those numbers of how he wasn't thrown to and things like that. So those are some things that CU's got to look up some of those numbers and point those things out because yeah, when you have zero defensive stats, you can't point to anything there except when you say, well, yeah, because they didn't want to throw at me,
Yeah.
and so you got to look up numbers like that. But yeah, Travis, he's unbelievable. And I think the other thing too, you've almost penciled in Travis in New York, right? At
Mhm.
this point, as long as he's healthy. The other
Yeah.
thing too is if Shador has a really nice next 3 weeks, he could get there too. Now it's rare. I did some research. It was rare that you have two guys from the same team down there, especially with two losses. But if he has a really nice next 3 weeks, he could get himself there too.
Yeah, it's just tough because on some level, even though they play different positions, that you think that there's going to be some kind of offsetting of the votes there, right?
Yeah, I would think so,
But
but there's still some prestige that if he's like fourth or fifth in the balloting, he can get himself to the ceremony.
okay,
He's
yeah,
he's
that'd
gonna
be
be
fun.
there. He's gonna be there either way. But to
That
get
would
the
make for
invite,
some great media
yeah,
opportunities with those two guys together. So that would
yeah,
be
no
fun.
question. Well, we got a lot before then, and it starts with Saturday in Utah. So I'll see you Saturday morning with a breakfast burrito.
Looking forward to it, Brian. Thanks.